Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear. Today I'm kind of settling a little bit of a debate for myself. If you're into Spydercos, then you probably already know what these two knives are. But these are two of my favorite knives that I own, period. This is the Paramilitary 2, and this is the Shaman. Both of these are US made Spydercos. Both of these come in a plethora of steels. They didn't used to. The Shaman used to just kind of be the standard configuration and that was it. But now there's been a ton of sprint runs and exclusives coming out. And so both of them have compelling offerings beyond the base models. Both of them are similar in a size comparison in terms of blade length, handle size, all of that. But they're two very different knives, in my opinion. So I figured I'd do a little bit of a head-to-head on them, see which one comes out in front, and I'm going to be scoring this as I go. So I haven't written down who I'm going to give each of these categories to. I'm just going to kind of figure it out during the video and be as objective as I can. The good thing is I own both of these knives and love both of these knives, so it shouldn't be that hard for me to be objective because I don't necessarily want one to beat the other coming into it. Now, I will say these are both versions that were exclusives, and so if you're looking for one new, these won't be the versions that you'll just find online. So for the sake of a fair comparison, I'm going to be pretending that each of these are their standard S30V versions with black G10. Now, I have had the Shaman in that exact configuration, S30V blade with black G10. I've owned several Paramilitary 2s. None have been that basic version, but I've had enough of them, and I've handled the original, the black with S30V. So I know both of these knives in their standard configuration, so that won't be hard for me to do. Just pretend that these aren't all dressed up and fancy, because this one is arguably the best one you can possibly get, except for maybe K390 or Maximet, depending on your preferences. But 10V is like, it's the best of the best, in my opinion, in terms of blade steels. This is the Scorpion edition of this knife from River's Edge Cutlery. They were the ones who got this knife done, like the internet asked for. So that's not a version that you can buy right now unless you find one on the secondary, and prices are already high on it, are probably only going to get higher as more people kind of hold on to them and they find their forever homes. This one is the Tree Rex version. It's a Rex 45 blade with these diamond wood or rosewood scales. This one was a Knife Center exclusive. And they sold out fairly quickly, that you can't buy them new anymore. And yeah, this isn't one you can buy unless, again, like that one, you find it on the secondary, and they're probably beginning to be inflated. Although I was able to get this one for about what it cost new with a lynch clip on it when I bought mine. So both of these, I have also changed the clips before we go in. I'm going to go ahead and review these with the aftermarket clips on them because, in my opinion, with any Paramilitary 2 or any Shaman, you're best off just forking out the $20-ish to get a clip from MXG Gear or Lynch Northwest. Both of them are pretty comparable in terms of quality to me. Both of them make the knives way better to carry. They still fit in hand every bit as good, if not even better. So just kind of factor in my opinion, you should be buying an aftermarket clip if you buy either of these knives. Anywho, we're now a couple minutes in and we haven't even begun. So let's get started. First things first, we're going to go over the looks of these two knives. Again, pretend these aren't in these colors and configurations, as difficult as that may be looking at these. I would say, to me personally, the knife that I think looks better is the Shaman. I don't think the PM2 is a particularly ugly knife, but I certainly don't think the point of a Paramilitary 2 is to be cool looking. Luckily, with a lot of the sprint runs and exclusives, you can get some in cool specs, like this one, that are really cool looking, in my opinion. But it's not like a classically beautiful knife design. This knife certainly doesn't feel like its focus is to look cool to me. It definitely feels more like it's focused on its purpose of being a real user EDC knife. Now the Shaman, on the other hand, also I don't think is the prettiest knife that I've ever owned, far from it. But I do think the lines on this one and the way that you can see the scales are contoured, the thickness of the blade stock even kind of like adds to the aesthetic to me in a way. I think, to me, the Shaman just looks more maybe finished. It looks higher end to me, and it is more expensive. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I certainly think the Shaman just looks better, and that's my opinion. So take that that one for what it's worth. The next would be the Action. Both of these are compression locks. Both of these are Spidey hole for deployment. So you can, of course, middle finger flip it like I just did. You can use your thumb for deployment. You could, I guess, do the shakedown thing. Sorry, that was kind of off camera. But yeah, both of these are going to deploy essentially identically. They both run on washers, both compression locks, so it's a draw there for me. I've had some Paramilitary 2s, especially some of my satin ones, that are super drop shutty. This one I'm still working on breaking in. It's gotten smoother. I haven't adjusted this pivot at all since getting it, but this is not the smoothest PM2 I've ever owned. I found that most DLC ones are kind of that way. And I've got a DLC Shaman coming in today. We'll see if that one is stiffer or the same or what. But yeah, they're on washers. If you want to get them drop shutty, you certainly can with some pivot adjustment and putting some lube in there, stuff like that. But yeah, both are fun actions. I really like playing with Spydercos because of the compression lock, because of the hole. So yeah, these are going to be a draw because they're essentially the same in terms of action. Next would be ergos. Now this is an interesting one for me. The ergos on the Shaman are part of what has drawn me to it. The Shaman has these nice rounded edges on the scales. It's almost like beyond chamfering. It's kind of like contouring, even though the scales do sit pretty flat, but you can see the edges are just really well shaped. The inner edge here is still a little on the sharp side, but it's not, I don't feel that when I'm holding the knife, frankly. I just feel it when I'm running my finger along it. But yeah, it's got the forward finger choil. It's got fantastic jimping. I love Spyderco's jimping. It's one of the only types of jimping that I find myself liking on knives. A lot of jimping is just kind of annoying to me. But yeah, the ergos on the Shaman for me are fantastic. It's part of why I love carrying this knife so much. The way it feels in my hand just really, really works. The Paramilitary 2, on the other hand, if you look at the profile of these scales, you'll see they are not contoured at all. There is a slight chamfer right along the edge just to knock the absolute corner off of these. But some people say that the Para 2 or PM2 and the Para 3 feel kind of too blocky for them. To me, I really like these factory scales. I feel like they both work for me, but in different ways. The G10 that comes on the PM2 is, in my mind, just the right amount of grippy. I really love how textured these scales are without being like rough on my pockets and like they're shredding my hands. They're just riding the line of giving the right amount of grip without being too rough to be comfortable. So I love how much purchase and traction I get on this knife. Now, the G10 Shaman, on the other hand, has more of a kind of sanded down feeling on its G10. This one actually feels pretty similar. I don't know if you can tell. There's a little bit of texture on these wood scales, which surprised me. Anywho, the G10 scales that come on the Shaman are just, they're not polished, but they're not grippy like the G10 on a Paramilitary 2 is. So they feel different in hand, but I almost wish I could have like the grippiness of these PM2 scales on a G10 Shaman while still having them rounded like they are on a Shaman. Yeah, I think in terms of ergos, both of them offer essentially the same amount of handle real estate. Both of them have this kind of belly here where your hand sets in and there's a cutout there, and then they're designed to very comfortably put you in the forward finger choil. They've both got a little bit of a swell out towards the back to kind of lock you in. It's really close, but I'll say the one that feels better in my hand is the Shaman. Again, if I am gonna do a task where I'm worried that the knife is gonna slip out of my hand for some reason, I'm not frankly worried that the shaman is gonna do that. And I've hard used my previous shaman plenty to know that it won't. But assuming I'm going to some hypothetical situation where traction on the knife is of the utmost importance, then I'll pick the PM2. But this one feels more comfortable to me. So I'm going to give the ergos to the shaman. Now, fit and finish. I would say when you get down close to these knives and you really start looking at them, the way they're constructed, they both come out of the same factory. They both have the same compression lock. They both run on washers. They're both ground really well. I really like Spyderco's fit and finish. I haven't had issues with knives coming from factory off center or with blade play or poor lockup or lock stick or anything like that. I've never had an issue with a new Spyderco. But I will say when you get close to these knives, those kind of extra steps that are taken on the shaman become a little bit apparent. Just the way that the scales are rounded instead of left in this kind of blocky configuration. And I guess that's kind of it. It's the scales feel a lot better to me, or like they've had just a lot more attention put on them, because everything else is equal on these. They both have nested liners, which are skeletonized and set, are skeletonized and are set into the scales of the knife, whether it's G10 or whatever other material they're using. So they fit nice and flush in there. Both of them have, well, I guess this has a back spacer and this has barrel spacers. So I guess that does add a certain extra little bit of panache to the knife. Plus on this one, the lanyard tube goes straight through. You can see with this clip, I've kind of blocked it off, which is fine. I couldn't care less about lanyards. But the lanyard tube is integrated to where the clip goes, so it's kind of out of the way in that sense, whereas here the lanyard tube is like a seemingly very important part of the handle to Spyderco, even though it's, I think the percentage of the population that it's important to is smaller than they may think. Anywho, yeah, I'm going to give fit and finish to the shaman, but it's not like the PM2 isn't well finished or has good fit. Like it's certainly a great knife. There's just, when you have these two in hand, this one does feel more, I don't even want to say thought out. It's like it's had more time put into it before it came to you, the final user. Now, the next one is value. So I think it's important to say, if you're looking at these in their standard configurations, the standard Paramilitary 2 and S30V is right about $150. It's like $151 or $152, right about there. The Shaman is $1 or $2 over $200. So there's a $50 gap between these two knives. Now, $50 when you're looking at a $500 knife versus a $550 knife, obviously percentage-wise, that's very different. But this is like 25%. This is a quarter of the value. So this one being 200 and this one being 150, that's a significant difference at this level in the market. That being said, I feel like you do get a little more on the Shaman, but I don't know if it's $50 more. Since they're coming from the same factory, they're being touched by the same hands, you have the same essential quality control and all of that. The things that you do get more on the Shaman are primarily blade stock. This is more blade, it feels like. The stock isn't, I guess, that much thicker than a PM2, but it's left really thick. You can tell there's just more mass here of blade steel that you're getting. Whether that's good or bad, I'll leave up to you. But yeah, you get the contouring, you get an actual back spacer instead of the barrels like you get on the PM2. They're both skeletonized, they're both set in liners. So I don't know, I guess that one's hard to decide. I would say if you're looking at these two knives and price is important to you and you're the kind of person who that $50 really makes a big difference, then do get the PM2. Because I don't know if I was really focused on my budget and that $50 made a big difference to me, if I would justify spending the extra $50 to get a Shaman. With how good of a knife the PM2 is, yeah, I guess I'll give value to the PM2. because that 50 bucks is a substantial gap at this price point. I don't think that the Shaman is a bad value. I think it's a fantastic knife. But at 150 bucks, a PM2 just feels like more knife for your money to me. So value is going to go to the PM2. The next one is carry. Now, like I said, I'm going to rate these knives with the clips that I have on them, because every PM2 I've ever owned, I have put a deep carry clip on. My last Shaman, I didn't, and I didn't really think it needed it. I liked the way it carried with the factory clip more than the way I like a PM2 carries with a factory clip. But this one, having this clip, I traded for it with it already on. I guess I bought it with it already on. Oof. It's awesome having a Lynch clip on here. So it took a knife that I already really enjoyed carrying, and it just stepped it up that little bit more. Now you'll see with the MXG clip I have on this one, it is truly deep carry. The profile of the knife sits just right at the same level as the top of that clip, so there's no knife sticking out of your pocket. This one, even with a deep carry clip, there is a little bit of knife sticking out, but it's a very marginal amount. It's not like there's a ton. And you can get deeper carry clips than this, so it'd be possible to get a clip that puts it all in your pocket. In terms of size in the pocket, these actually, to me, feel about the same in terms of their footprint. They both have a negligible difference in handle length. They're just virtually identical in terms of length that way. The tallness this direction, because the hump is so big here, overall the profile is about the same. Obviously this one stays thick for longer, whereas this blade just plummets right down into the scale. But yeah, the footprint feels about the same. The PM2 is a little lighter for sure. I think most of what's to blame for that is the blade stock thickness on the Shaman. But the Shaman doesn't feel too heavy in my pocket. It never has. Neither of these knives are knives that are going to disappear in the pocket. If you're looking for a knife that's going to do that, then buy like a Para 3 lightweight. Even then, the Para 3 lightweight still is pretty tall this direction in the pocket, and it's still relatively thick. Get a bug out if you want a knife that's going to disappear in the pocket, or now the mini bug out. So neither of these are going to be like super sensational carry, but both of them carry very well for me, especially for how usable these knives are. The amount of like sacrifice you make to carry a knife, I don't know if that's even the right term for it, but like when I put a really heavy knife in my pocket, one that I can feel is there, not necessarily that it bothers me, but it's like I feel it all day. I feel like there should be some reward for that. And for both of these knives, the pleasure it is to use them for real tasks, I feel like justifies every bit of how much I can feel them in the pocket. Again, they're not uncomfortable, they don't bother me in the pocket, but these aren't knives that I don't know are there. I can't forget that this knife is in my pocket nearly as easily as I can other slimmer, lighter options. So for carry, I'm going to give it a tie. I feel like these both, they carry within such a slim margin that I'm splitting hairs if I try to pick a winner. They both just, they carry well, especially for their size, weight, and abilities. Now, last, we're going to go over cutting. Which of these has the better blade for actually cutting material? Now, as I mentioned, the blade stock is noticeably thicker on the Shaman. They're both flat ground knives. This one, I guess you couldn't quite call full flat ground because it does have this flat up here, but it's a nice tall flat grind. It does stay relatively thick behind the edge, whereas the PM2 is nice and thin behind the edge. There are thinner knives behind the edge than the PM2, but I do feel like, at least for me, when I'm comparing knives from the factory, as just like the PM2 is such a mass-produced knife. When I'm comparing another knife for thinness behind the edge, I feel like the PM2 is kind of my benchmark because it's just such a great cutter. So where that leaves us, essentially, because this one does stay thicker behind the edge, it's a thicker blade stock, I feel like for cutting things like cardboard, it's a really good, that's what most people are putting their knives through, Amazon packages and whatnot, right? For cutting cardboard, the PM2 wins. It's a better cutter at going through stuff like that. Even like rope and light to medium duty EDC. This tip is also crazy pointy. It goes into material. It's stabby. Whereas the tip on this guy is certainly more robust. But I will say, I carry both of these knives outdoors a fair bit. And so like when I'm hiking, if you watch some of my videos, you'll probably see I keep a fixed blade vertically mounted on my left shoulder strap so that I can draw with my right hand, and I've got a fixed blade there. Right now that knife is the BGM Pike. It just kicked out the SE Azula 2. Sometimes I'll also wear a belt knife, and I like to have fixed blades while I'm outdoors. Obviously, fixed blades are better suited for hard outdoor use tasks, and when I'm out on a hiking trail, it's not weird for me to be carrying a genuine fixed blade. But I do usually have a pocket knife in my pocket as well. And with my S30V Shaman, I carried that hiking a ton, and I put it through small branches and twigs and brush and all kinds of stuff. Say a limb had fallen over the trail, I've batoned through light stuff with that knife. The Shaman, with its robustness, I don't know if that's a technical, if that's a real word or not, with its robustitude, the Shaman, because it's just that little bit thicker and sturdier for those type of tasks. If you're going beyond the typical EDC task, I think the Shaman is the better cutter, the better blade for that kind of thing. It's just more substantial. There's more material here, and assuming they're both S30V, they're both the same blade steel, you're going to get the same edge performance out of them. But yeah, I think it's, for those heavy tasks, the Shaman's going to win. But for slicing through material, which is the way I feel like I should grade this one, I will say, like, passing through cardboard, paper, tape, the typical person's EDC tasks, the PM2 is going to be the better slicer. So for what it's worth, I'm going to call the PM2 the winner in that category. But if you're looking for an outdoor folding knife, which isn't really a thing, I think most people would recommend just use a fixed blade if you're going to do that type of stuff I just described, and usually I do. But if you want a folding knife that's capable of that kind of stuff and will just chew up those hard use tasks that you kind of throw at it, then I would give that to the Shaman. So for this, PM2, but yeah, take that for what it's worth. Anywho, that is all of the categories. So across those categories, the way I grade is if a knife wins, it gets 1 point, and the other one gets 0. If it's a tie, they both get 1 point. So the way we ended up is a win, just barely, of 5-4, Shaman to PM2. So 5 points to the Shaman, 4 points to the PM2. Now, there's a reason that I own both of these knives. I plan to always own a Paramilitary 2 and a Shaman. This specifically is going to be my forever PM2. I waited a long time for this knife to become a reality. This is the one that I want to have and use forever. So this is my PM2 that I'm always going to keep. The Shaman, maybe this will be my one. I've got some aftermarket scales coming for it. This should be fun. But the point of this is to express that I do love both of these knives. I feel like I almost have slightly different use theories for these. The Shaman feels more robust to me. It feels more hardcore, just that little bit. Whereas the PM2 is a great large EDC knife for me. The Shaman does great for EDC tasks. I don't want to take that away from it. It's a little thick behind the edge, but it still glides through cardboard, still cuts through rope like crazy. It'll open packages just like the rest of my knives will. This is no slouch in that department, but it is just that little bit heavier and more substantial. Whereas the PM2, part of what I love about it is that for the blade length, it's pretty light. You've got a nice grippy scale material that feels super user-friendly. The ergos work for me. So in my head, there's not really a winner here. I just want to own both of these. But for what it's worth, if you're only going to buy one, hopefully this is enlightening to you, the strengths and weaknesses that I find in each of them. So yeah, I hope that helps. I will say I do think the Shaman deserved the 5-4 win, but it is that little bit more expensive. So Like I said, in the value category, if you can only buy one and that 50 bucks makes a difference, by no means will I judge you at all if you get just the PM2 instead of the Shaman. Yeah, there's definitely solid arguments for each, but that has been the little bit of a head-to-head between these two. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. It was fun for me to kind of see how these knives stack up in my mind and put it into words. So there you have it.